You think sex is just about pleasure, but deep down you know it's so much more. There are thoughts you never express, fantasies you hide even from yourself, desires that arise in silence, and the shame that follows them closely. What if these urges aren't a problem? What if they're a message, a mirror your unconscious holds up to you, revealing a part of yourself you've been refusing to see? Carl Jung didn't believe sex was solely biological. He believed it was a psychological fire, the energy of the soul trying to express itself. And the more you ignore it, the more it takes over. This video isn't about behavior. It's about the invisible power of sexual energy in the mind. This desire that resides not only in your body, but also in your dreams, your wounds, your relationships, and your identity. You'll discover how repressed sexuality creates your shadow, how attraction is often a projection, and how your deepest fantasies reveal the unhealed parts of you. If you've ever been ashamed of your desire, if you've ever wondered why sex has such a powerful influence on your life, stay not to be judged but to understand. For the parts of you you've labeled dirty are often the ones that hold your greatest truth. Let's begin. First of all, sex isn't just physical. It's a psychological energy. Sex doesn't just happen in the body. It's born in the imagination long before contact, long before the present moment. It courses through the nervous system like a silent flame, awakening not only sensations but also emotions. There's something spiritual about it, even if no one says it out loud. Carl Jung called this force libido, but not just in the sense Freud understood it. Freud saw it primarily as a biological drive. Jung saw it as something more universal, a symbolic energy that fuels creativity, connection, desire, and transformation. He believed that sexuality was a facet of the psyche's life force, raw, wild, and profoundly human. When you feel sexual attraction, it's not always another person's body that's the problem. Sometimes it's your soul searching for what it's missing. Desire becomes a signal that pushes you toward fulfillment, not just pleasure. But most people don't know how to listen. Society teaches you to act impulsively or to repress it altogether. Neither approach helps you understand it. Both approaches keep you disconnected from yourself and others, because what you repress, you never know. Sexual energy is one of the purest forms of psychic vitality. It can inspire art. It can create intimacy. It can destroy illusions, but only if you recognize it, not as taboo but as truth. And the truth still has power. Think about times when you felt overwhelmed by desire, not just sexual, but for union, closeness, or even to feel desired. It wasn't just desire. It was a thirst for fulfillment. It was your psyche's yearning to return to something forgotten. Jung believed that libido wasn't just erotic. He said it was the fundamental energy of life. The impulse to move, to grow, to unite opposites. Sexuality was just a form. It expressed itself. And misinterpreted, it became the most distorted. If you've ever felt guilty for wanting more, if you've ever pursued passion, only to feel even emptier afterward, it's because you were chasing the surface of desire, not its source. And this source is always psychological. True sexuality is not performative. It cannot be qualified, demonstrated, or displayed. It is a current that springs from the depths of the being, and if we trace it back, it leads to the soul. According to Jung, ignoring this force does not silence it. It relegates it to the unconscious, and once there, it manifests in unexpected ways in your dreams, fantasies, attachments, and even fears. It never disappears. It simply changes form. That's why this work is important. Not to correct your behavior, but to connect with the underlying energy. Because when you connect to this energy with awareness, you don't become less human, you become whole. Second, the shadow of repressed desire. Unwanted desire doesn't disappear. It sinks. It slides beneath the surface of your consciousness and settles in your unconscious. It doesn't rest there, it waits. Carl Jung called this space the shadow. It's the part of you try not to see. The part you deny, reject, judge, or hide. But it never stops wanting to be known. When sexual desire is repressed, it is not understood, but rather humiliated, not repressed. It turns into anger, guilt, or obsession. Sometimes it is projected onto others. You may find yourself criticizing someone's clothes, not because they offend you, but because they awaken something in you that you have been told to repress. You might envy someone's freedom, not because you disapprove of it, but because deep down you yearn for it. The shadow carries not only your anger or fear, It also carries your wasted vitality, the wildness you buried to feel safe, the fire you extinguished to be accepted. By repressing your sexual energy, you don't just avoid scandal. You're distancing yourself from a significant part of your humanity. And this disconnection comes at a price that manifests itself in unexpected ways. It manifests itself in relationships that feel empty, in fantasies that invade your mind, in addictions that feel absurd but impossible to quit, in the fear of being seen too deeply or touched too gently. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it destiny." Repressed desire becomes your destiny when you refuse to face it. And the more you deny it, the more it seeps through your words, your silence, your gaze. Think of how many people secretly suffer from shame about their sexuality. They smile on the surface, but a nagging guilt gnaws at them. They learn to live normally while drowning in contradiction. This is the price you pay for being torn apart. But here's the deeper truth. Your sexual energy isn't bad. It's not something to be purified or eliminated. It's something to be understood. For what lives in the shadows becomes distorted. What is repressed becomes compulsion, judgment, or obsession. But what is brought to light can become sacred, even beautiful. Healing doesn't mean becoming less sexual. It means losing fear of one's own depths, being less ashamed of one's desires, being more honest with what lives within oneself. There is a kind of peace that comes from giving up escape. A freedom that begins the moment we stop calling our desire dangerous and begin to see it as a mirror. A freedom that reveals to us not who we pretend to be, but who we really are. 3. The anima. The animus and the sexual mirror. Attraction isn't always limited to the other person. Sometimes it's a part of ourselves trying to come home. Jung believed that when we fall deeply, irrationally, or even obsessively in love, we often discover a part of our psyche that we haven't fully integrated. He called them the anima and the animus, two inner figures that live within each of us. The anima is the feminine energy of men. The animus is the masculine energy of women. It's not about gender roles. It's about the deep emotional and spiritual qualities we possess, whether we express them or not. And when one of these archetypes isn't developed, it often appears outside of us, projected onto another person, someone who seems magnetic, mysterious, even divine. This is why some people seem to glow when you look at them. Not because they're perfect, but because they reflect something you've subconsciously longed to find. Something soft, strong, intuitive, or alive. Something you haven't yet conquered. When a man dreams of an attractive woman who feels dangerous and irresistible, it may not be about her at all. It can be a self-awareness rising from the depths, demanding to be known. Similarly, a woman attracted to a stoic and powerful figure may discover her own animosity, her as yet unknown strength. This is the deepest dimension of desire. It is not always about touch. Sometimes it is about recognition, seeing something hidden within oneself reflected in the face of another person. Jung taught that to grow psychologically, we must engage in a relationship with our animus. Not just outward romantic relationships, but a sacred inner dialogue. What does your inner femininity yearn to feel? What does your inner masculinity yearn to build or protect? Many relationships fail not because of incompatibility, but because we expect the other to fill what we have neglected in ourselves. We project ideal images onto them, and when they don't fulfill these fantasies, we blame them instead of waking up. This is why some crushes, infatuations, even obsessions seem so intense. They carry a charge that defies logic. Because it's not just about the person. It's about a missing part of our own fulfillment that's trying to return. Sexual attraction isn't just physical. It's psychological and symbolic. Every attraction hides a message, if you have the courage to question what it reveals. And sometimes that message comes back to you. The people who captivate you aren't always meant to stay, but they might be meant to awaken, to reawaken something long dormant, to remind you that the love you seek often grows from within. And until you look at yourself, you'll continue chasing your own reflection in someone else's face, mistaking the echo for the source, a sense of unattainable fulfillment. 4th, projection. You're not in love, you're in a fantasy. There are times when love seems magical. You meet someone, and an electric emotion runs through you. You feel seen, alive, and finally whole. But what if what you're feeling has nothing to do with them? Carl Jung warned us that much of what we call love is actually projection. It's when you take a hidden part of yourself, your desire, your hope, your longing, and unconsciously transfer it onto another person. You don't fall in love with them. You fall in love with the part of yourself they reflect. That's why some relationships are so intense, even when they're fleeting. You don't fall in love with who they are. You fall in love with what they represent. An ideal, a savior, a dream you didn't know you were pursuing yet. Perhaps they remind you of a distant relative. Perhaps they reflect your desire to be desired, protected, or understood. Perhaps their silence awakens your need to prove your worth. These feelings are real, but their origins aren't always clear. This is what makes projection so powerful. You think it's about the present moment, but they're often unfinished stories from your past, and that story begins in your own unconscious. The problem isn't the projection itself. Jung said, projection is natural. It's how we relate to the world. But the pain begins when we confuse projection with truth. When we hold someone hostage to an image they never agreed to carry, we expect them to heal our wounds without knowing them. You assign them a role in your fantasy. And when they don't fulfill it, you feel betrayed. But in reality, they never promised to be your salvation. They simply are. Projecting is like painting someone else's face in the colors of your soul, then having your heart broken when the rain washes it away. The pain is real, but it's not theirs to heal. It is your responsibility to understand this. Ask yourself this question: what did I fall in love with? Was it their kindness or my desire for security? Was it their mystery or my desire to feel special? Was it their silence or my need to be chosen? When love begins as a projection, it usually ends in confusion, for no human being can satisfy an image born of their own unmet needs. Over time, the illusion cracks, and what remains is either resentment or awakening. But here's the gift. By acknowledging the projection, we begin to heal. We discover the parts of ourselves that have been lost, denied, or forgotten. And instead of seeking them in others, we begin to welcome them. This is how love matures, not by eliminating desire, but by uncovering it. Not by blaming others for our emptiness, but by facing the underlying desire with compassion. You may not be in love with the person. You may be in love with the possibility they represent. And once you see this clearly, you will finally be free to love without illusions. 5. Sex and spiritual awakening. The sacred fire. There's a reason desire feels like fire. It doesn't just heat you up. It can consume you, break you, or transform you. And sometimes that's its purpose. Throughout history, spiritual traditions have struggled with sexuality. Some have sought to repress it, others to sanctify it, but those who dug deeper saw further. They saw desire as a doorway, not a distraction from God, but a path to the soul. Not a sin to be fled, but a force to be understood. Jung believed that approaching sex with awareness becomes a mirror of transformation. He saw libido not just as a physical energy, but as the psychic current that animates the entire being. The same creative force of life also awakens understanding. Body, mind, and soul are never truly separate. In some mystical paths such as Tantra, sexuality is sacred. It is not just about union with others. It is about union with oneself, a reconciliation of opposites that opens the heart to presence. In Christian mysticism too, the language of divine desire often reflects erotic desire. The soul yearns, the heart aches. These are not metaphors of weakness. They are echoes of something eternal. For when we allow ourselves to feel deeply without shame, we begin to touch something ancient and alive. Passion transforms into devotion. Desire becomes light. This is what Jung meant when he said that sex could be a spiritual experience. Not just in the act, but in the awareness it demands. The courage to be present, the vulnerability to be seen, and the humility to relinquish control. There is something sacred in the rawness of desire, not because it is pure, but because it is sincere. It strips away all pretense. It brings you back to the truth of your desire. And in that desire there is a path, not to complacency, but to integration. Not to escape, but to find. Don't be afraid of the fire within you. Learn to nurture it, to listen to it when it speaks to you, to follow it when it guides you inward, not outward. For the deepest awakenings often arise in the most uncomfortable places. And sex, seen with sacred eyes, is not the enemy of your soul. It's the spark that reminds you you are already whole, even in your hunger. 6. What you fear to admit your fantasy reveals. Most people think fantasies are meaningless, just random images or secret desires. They're embarrassed to express them aloud, but what if they aren't random at all? What if your fantasies are messages from your wounds? Carl Jung believed that the psyche expresses itself in symbols, not logic, but images, sensations, and dreams. Your sexual fantasies aren't just about pleasure. They're attempts to reorganize pain you've never processed. The mind replays what the heart has never healed. And often, the scenarios you keep imagining aren't about desire. They're about power, vulnerability, control, acceptance, or being chosen. Each one tells a story you haven't finished writing. Maybe you fantasize about a relentless pursuit. Maybe it's not about seduction. Maybe it's the pain of never feeling desired, the desire to be seen without question. Or maybe your fantasies revolve around submission, not because you're weak, but because you carry the weariness of always needing to be strong. And deep down you long to let go. Your private fantasies often reflect what you were denied as a child. Conditional love, absent caresses, security never promised. There's nothing to be ashamed of. It's something you need to understand, because your fantasies are not your flaw. This is your psyche's way of revealing where you're still hurting. Upon closer inspection, your mind isn't trying to corrupt you. It's trying to heal you in the only language it knows. And that language is often intimate, symbolic and emotionally charged. For the deeper the pain, the more intense the image. Jung never encouraged repression. This fostered a relationship with the unconscious, a willingness to contemplate the image and ask, what do you need from me? What haven't I heard? Sometimes the fantasy reappears because the wound is still bleeding. Sometimes it intensifies because one doesn't yet feel safe enough to feel. But when approached with compassion rather than judgment, it begins to soften. This moment of revelation can change your life. You no longer feel controlled by your imagination. You begin to understand that behind every desire lies a memory, and behind every memory lies a need that demands to be satisfied. It's not about giving in to every fantasy. It's about learning from it, letting it guide you to those inner spaces that still feel incomplete, and paying attention to it, not avoiding it. For the more you reject your fantasies, the more they become rooted in secrecy. But when you gently name them, they become invitations, not threats. You are not broken by what you imagine. You are simply burdened by stories that no one has helped you translate. And now you have the opportunity to listen. 7. Integrating your sexual shadow. Becoming whole. Wholeness isn't achieved through perfection. It's achieved by surrendering the aspects of ourselves we've been taught to fear. And for many, the most profoundly exiled part is their sexuality. Not just the act, but the energy, the emotion, the truth it carries. Carl Jung believed the path to healing lay not in denial, but in integration. Face the shadow not with shame, but with curiosity, honesty, and love. Your sexual shadow is not your enemy. It is the part of you that preserves your intensity, your creativity, your desire to live. It was formed when your desire was met with silence, judgment, or rejection. And he learned to survive by hiding. But what hides in the darkness always yearns for the light. It doesn't want to control you. It wants to be seen, heard, and welcomed without punishment. For only in this space can it begin to transform. Integrating your sexual shadow means accepting the thoughts you usually reject. This means asking yourself, what does this desire really desire? Not just physically, but also emotionally, spiritually, and humanly. You may discover it's not about sex at all. It's about connection, freedom, or dignity. This is where the inner work becomes sacred. You begin to make peace with what once frightened you. You stop seeing parts of yourself as bad, and you begin to hear what they've been trying to tell you for years. There's a quiet strength in letting go, in being able to say, this is part of me and belongs to me. This affirmation isn't self-indulgent. It's soothing. Many people try to kill desire, but the goal isn't to kill it, It to understand it, to mature it, to deeply nourish it. For only then can desire serve as something other than an impulse. When you integrate your sexual shadow, something changes. You feel less reactive, less controlled by fantasy, more grounded in presence. You stop seeking intensity as an escape. You begin to choose experiences that honor your truth, not those that distract you from your pain. And little by little, the shame begins to dissipate, not because you no longer have a shadow, but because you are no longer afraid of it. This is what it means to reach wholeness, not to be pure in the eyes of others, but to be honest before your soul. To walk with every part of yourself, not just the ones that seem acceptable, You were never created to be divided against yourself. You were created to bear your desire wisely, to feel its fire without burning, to bear its power without consuming. And as soon as you begin to embrace the shadow, you begin to reclaim the light it has hidden, not from the world, but from yourself. 8. The path to follow. Sacred consciousness in a sexualized world. We live in a world where sex is used to sell everything. We see it in advertisements, movies, music, in the images that invade our screens. But most of what we see isn't real connection. It's a manipulated, exaggerated, and empty representation. And when that becomes our only mirror, we begin to believe that sexuality is something to be displayed, demonstrated, or controlled. We forget that it was once something sacred, something that lived silently in the soul. The danger isn't in talking too much about sex. The danger is in doing so without depth, without reverence, without truth, and without the space to explore what it really means to us. Carl Jung never asked people to be moral according to society. He asked them to be honest with their own psyches, to pay attention to what drives them, and to respond to it with awareness rather than repression. Awareness is what transforms instinct into intuition. It is what transforms compulsion into choice. When you become aware of your energy, you no longer need to run from it or act on it. You can navigate a sexualized world without getting lost because you know what you carry within. You have known your desires, your fears, your longings, and you have brought them into the light of your own understanding. It's not about purity or control. It's about presence. The ability to be fully with yourself, gently and without shame. Even when the world pulls you in every direction, you don't need to silence your desire. You must listen to what it teaches you and choose how you want to live in relationship with it. Not blindly, but intentionally. The path forward isn't about rejecting the body. It's about remembering that the body holds a sacred truth. It feels, speaks, remembers, and yearns for wholeness as much as the soul does. By bringing sacred awareness to your sexuality, you rediscover something you should never have lost. You begin to love without illusions and to live without division. This is the silent revolution, not external but internal. A return to intimacy with your own depth. A return to yourself. You should never have been ashamed of feeling deeply. Desire was never your enemy. It was a messenger inviting you to return home, to the parts of yourself you had silenced. If this video has awakened something in you, leave it open. Let it be a beginning, not an end. You don't have to figure everything out today. You just have to stay close to yourself, especially the parts you've learned to hide. If this resonated with you, please share it with someone who is wondering the same thing. Leave a comment below explaining what resonated with you most. Let's make this a space of honesty, not acting, of truth, not perfection. And if you're still searching, keep going, because whatever you've been running from might just be the door to your true self. You are not alone in this work, and you are not unduly loved either. Subscribe if you would like to continue exploring these depths with me. There is even more to discover beneath the surface, and together we will continue to dig deeper, step by step with honesty.